The guards didn't know what was happening until the horses had already run past them in a blur of black and grey. They were through the main palace gate before the guards' cries finished echoing. Ansel's red hair shone like a beacon as she broke for the side exit from the city, people leaping aside to let them pass. Celaena looked back through the crowded streets only once, and that was enough to see the 3 mounted guards charging after them, shouting.
You won't get away.
But the girls were already through the city gates and into the sea of red dunes that spread beyond. Ansel riding as if the denizens of hell were behind her. Celaena could only race after her, doing her best to keep in the saddle. Cassida moved like thunder and turned with the swiftness of lightning. The mare was so fast that Celaena's eyes watered in the wind. The 3 guards, astride ordinary horses, were still far off, but not nearly far enough for comfort. In the vastness of the Red Desert, Celaena had no choice but to follow Ansel. Celaena clung to Cassida's mane as they took dune after dune, up and down and up, until there was only the red sand and the cloudless sky, and the rumble of hooves, rolling through the world. Ansel slowed down enough for Celaena to catch up, and they galloped along a broad, flat top of a dune.
Are you out of your damned mind?
Celaena shouted.
I don't want to walk home. We're taking a shortcut.
Ansel shouted back. Behind them, the 3 guards still charged onwards. Celaena debated slamming Cassida into Hisley to send Ansel tumbling into the dunes, leaving her for the guards to take care of. But the girl pointed over Hisley's dark head.
Live a little Ceradothin.
And just like that, the dunes parted to reveal the turquoise expanse of the Gulf of Oro. The cool sea breeze kissed her face, and Celaena leaned into it, almost moaning with pleasure. Ansel let out a whoop, careening down the final dune and heading straight towards the beach and the breaking waves. Despite herself, Celaena smiled and held on tighter. Cassida hit the hard-packed red sand and gained speed, faster and faster. Celaena had a sudden moment of clarity then, as her hair ripped from her braid and the wind tore at her clothes. Of all the girls in all the world, here she was, on a spit of beach in the Red Desert, astride an Asterion horse, racing faster than the wind. Most would never experience this. She would never experience anything like this again. And for that one heartbeat, when there was nothing more to it than that, she tasted bliss, so complete that she tipped her head back to the sky and laughed. The guards reached the beach, their fierce cries nearly swallowed up by the booming surf. Ansel cut away, surging towards the dunes and the giant wall of rock that arose nearby. The Desert Cleaver. If Celaena knew her geography correctly, which she did, as she'd studied maps of the desert lands for weeks now. A giant wall that arose from the earth that stretched from the eastern coast all the way to the black dunes of the south, split clean down the middle by an enormous fissure. They'd come around it on the way from the fortress, which was on the other side of the cleaver. And that was what had made their journey so insufferably long. But today... "Faster, Cassida," she whispered into the horse's ear. As if the mare understood her, she took off, and soon Celaena was again beside Ansel, cutting up dune after dune as they headed straight for the red wall of rock.
What are you doing?
She called to Ansel. Ansel gave her a fiendish grin.
We're going through it. What good's an Asterion horse if it can't jump?
Celena's stomach dropped.
You can't be serious.
Ansel glanced over her shoulder, her hair streaming past her face.
They'll chase us to the doors of the fortress if we go the long way.
But the guards couldn't make the jump, not with ordinary horses. A narrow opening in the wall of red rock appeared, twisting away from sight. Ansel headed straight towards it. How dare she make such a reckless, stupid decision without consulting Celaena first?
You planned this the whole time!
Celaena snapped. Though the guards still remained a good distance away, they were close enough for Celaena to see the weapons, including longbows strapped to them. Ansel didn't reply. She just sent Hisley flying forward. Celaena had to choose between the unforgiving walls of the cleaver and the 3 guards behind them. She could take the guards in a few seconds, if she slowed enough to draw her daggers, but they were mounted, and aiming might be impossible. Which meant she'd have to get close enough to kill them, as long as they didn't start firing at her first. They probably wouldn't shoot at Cassida, not when she was worth more than all of their lives put together. But Celaena couldn't bring herself to risk the magnificent beast. And if she killed the guards, that still left her alone in the desert, since Ansel surely wouldn't stop until she was on the other side of the cleaver. Since she had no desire to die of thirst, cursing colourfully, Celaena plunged after Ansel into the passage through the canyon. The passage was so narrow that Celaena's legs nearly grazed the rain-smoothed orange walls. The beating hooves echoed like firecrackers, the sound only worsening as the 3 guards entered the canyon. It would have been nice, she realised, to have Sam with her. He might be a pain in her ass, but he'd proven himself to be more than handy in a fight. Extraordinarily skilled, if she felt like admitting it. Ansel wove and turned with the passage, fast as a stream down a mountainside. It was all Celaena could do to hold on to Cassida as they followed. A twang snapped through the canyon, and Celaena ducked low to Cassida's surging head, just as an arrow ricocheted off the rock a few feet away. So much for not firing at the horses. Another sharp turn set her in the clear, but the relief was short-lived as she beheld the long, straight passage, and the ravine beyond it. Celaena's breath lodged in her throat. The jump had to be at least 30 feet, and she didn't want to know how long the fall was if she missed. Ansel barreled ahead, then her body tensed, and Hisley leapt from the cliff edge. The sunlight caught in Ansel's hair as they flew over the ravine, and she loosed a joyous cry as they set the whole canyon humming. A moment later, she landed on the other side, with only inches to spare. There wasn't enough room for Celaena to stop, even if she tried. They wouldn't have enough space to slow down, and they'd go right over the edge. So she began praying to anyone, anything. Cassida gave a sudden burst of speed, as if she too understood that only the gods would see them safely over. And then they were at the lip of the ravine, which went down, 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 into a jade river hundreds of feet below. And Cassida was soaring. Only air beneath them. Nothing to keep her from the death that now wrapped around her completely. Celaena could only hold on and wait to fall, to die, to scream as she met her horrible end. But then there were rocks underneath. Solid rock. She gripped Cassida tighter as they landed in the narrow passage on the other side, the impact exploding through her bones, and kept galloping. Back across the ravine, the guards had pulled to a halt, and cursing at them in a language she was grateful she didn't understand. Ansel let out another whoop when they came out the other end of the cleaver, and she turned to find Celaena, still riding close behind her. They rode across the dunes, heading west, the setting sun turning the entire world blood red. When the horses were too winded to keep running, Ansel stopped atop a dune. Celaena pulled up beside her. Ansel looked at Celaena, wildness still rampant in her eyes. Breathing hard, Celaena didn't say anything as she punched Ansel so hard in the face that the girl went flying off her horse and tumbling into the sand. Ansel just clutched her jaw and laughed. Though they could have made it back before midnight, and though Celaena pushed her to continue riding, Ansel insisted on stopping for the night. So when their campfire was nothing but embers, and the horses were dozing behind them, Ansel and Celaena lay on their backs on the side of a dune and stared up at the stars. Her hands tucked behind her head, Celaena took a long, deep breath, savouring the balmy night breeze, the exhaustion ebbing from her limbs. She rarely got to see the stars so bright, not with the lights of Rifthold. The wind moved across the dunes, and the sand sighed.
You know, I never learned the constellations,
Ansel said quietly.
though I think ours are different from yours. The names, I mean.
It took Celaena a moment to realise that by ours, she didn't mean the Silent Assassins. She meant her people in the Western Wastes. Celaena pointed to a cluster of stars to their left. That's the dragon. She traced the shape. See the head, legs, and tail?
No.
Celaena nudged her with an elbow and pointed to another group of stars. That's the swan. The lines on either side are the wings, and the arc is its neck.
What about that one?
Ansel said. That's the stag, Celaena breathed. Lord of the North.
Why does he get a fancy title? What about the swan? And the dragon?
Celaena snorted, but the smile faded when she stared at the familiar constellation. Because the stag remains constant. No matter the season, he's always there.
Why?
Celaena took a long breath. So the people of Terrasen will always know how to find their way home. So they can look up at the sky, no matter where they are, and know Terrasen is forever with them.
Do you ever want to return to Terrasen?
Celaena turned her head to look at Ansel. She hadn't told her she was from Terrasen.
You talk about Terrasen the way my father used to talk about our land.
Ansel said. Celaena was about to reply when she caught the word. Used to. Ansel's attention remained on the stars.
I lied to the master when I came here.
She whispered, as if afraid someone else would hear them in the emptiness of the desert. Celaena looked back to the sky.
My father never sent me to train, and there is no Briarcliff or Briarcliff Hall. There hasn't been for 5 years.
A dozen questions sprung up, but Celaena kept her mouth shut, letting Ansel speak.
I was 12 when Lord Hawke took over several territories around Briarcliff, and then demanded we yield to him as well, that we bow to him as High King of the Wastes. My father refused. He said there was one tyrant already conquering everything east of the mountains. He didn't want one in the west, too.
Celena's blood went cold as she braced herself for what she knew was coming.
2 weeks later, Lord Hawke marched into our lands with his men, seized our villages, our livelihood, our people. And when he got to Briarcliff Hall...
Ansel drew a shuddering breath.
When he arrived at Briarcliff Hall, I was in the kitchen. I saw them from the window and hid in a cupboard as Locke walked in. My sister and father were upstairs. Locke stayed in the kitchen as his men brought them down, and I didn't dare make a sound as Lord Locke made my father watch as he...
She stumbled, but forced it out, spitting it as if it was poison.
My father begged on his hands and knees, but Locke still made my father watch as he slit my sister's throat, then his. And I just hid there, even as they killed our servants too. I hid and did nothing. And when they were gone, I took my father's sword from his corpse and ran. I ran and ran until I couldn't run anymore at the foothills of the White Fang Mountains. And that's when I collapsed at the campfire of a witch, one of the Iron Teeth. I didn't care if she killed me. But she told me that it was not my fate to die there. That I should journey south to the silent assassins in the Red Desert. And there I would find my fate. She fed me and bound my bleeding feet and gave me gold. Gold that I later used to commission my armour. Then sent me on my way.
Ansel wiped at her eyes.
So I've been here ever since. Training for the day when I'm strong enough to return to Briarcliff Hall and take back what is mine. Someday, I'll march into High King Locke's hall and repay him for what he did to my family. With my father's sword.
Her hand grazed the wolf head hilt.
This sword will end his life. Because this sword is all I have left of them.
Celaena hadn't realised she was crying until she'd tried to take a deep breath. Saying that she was sorry didn't quite feel adequate. She knew what this sort of loss was like. The words didn't do anything at all. Ansel slowly turned to look at her, her eyes lined with silver. She traced Celaena's cheekbone, where the bruises had once been.
Where do men find it in themselves to do such monstrous things? How do they find it acceptable?
We'll make them pay for it in the end.
Celaena grasped Ansel's hand. The girl squeezed back. Hard.
We'll see to it that they pay.
Yes.
Ansel shifted her gaze back to the stars.
Yes, we will.